Caleb Thornton dropped to one knee in the middle of Main Street, took the hand of the heaviest woman in Copper Ridge, and kissed her knuckles like she was a queen. The whole town went silent. Every widow who had painted her lips and tightened her corset for the richest bachelor in Montana stood there with her mouth hanging open. Because the ghost of the Beartooth Mountains didn't choose silk. He didn't choose beauty. He chose the girl who mended his torn boot in silence when the rest of the world stepped over him. And what happened next brought the whole town to its knees. If you want to see how this story ends, subscribe to our channel and stay with us until the very last word. And drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. We love seeing just how far these stories travel. Caleb Thornton hadn't spoken to a woman in 7 years. Not a hello. Not a thank you. Not even a get out of my way. 7 years of silence on the mountain, talking to his horse and the hawks and the cold silver rock that made him rich and kept him lonely. Folks in Copper Ridge called him the Phantom. They said he killed a man in Abilene. They said he ate raw elk and slept in caves. They said a grizzly clawed his face, and he just kept walking. Most of it was lies. The scar was real. On a Thursday morning in July of 1881, the Phantom came down from the mountain. He rode a black stallion named Gunpowder through the main street of Copper Ridge at 10:30, the dust rising behind him like a curtain. The heat was brutal, the kind of Montana summer heat that cracked the earth and made men mean. Caleb Thornton didn't seem to notice. He sat that saddle like he was carved from the same granite as the Beartooth Peaks. 6'5", 240 pounds, beard wild, eyes the color of a winter river. He tied Gunpowder to the post outside Pritchard's General Store and pushed through the door. The bell jangled. Every head turned. Caleb limped to the counter. His left boot was split open along the sole, the leather torn from heel to toe. Each step made a wet slapping sound against the pine floor. He'd wrapped it with rawhide, but the fix was failing. Emmett Pritchard, the shopkeeper, gripped the counter like it might save him. "Mr. Thornton, what can I—" "Nails," Caleb said. "Whiskey. Tobacco." "Yes, sir. Right away." Standing near the bolts of fabric were 2 women who had been waiting for exactly this moment. Cordelia Ashworth was the first to move. She was the richest widow in Copper Ridge, 41 years old, buried 2 husbands, and had been shopping for a third since Tuesday. She wore a lavender dress with a cinched waist and a hat with a silk flower that cost more than most men's horses. "Mr. Thornton," Cordelia said, stepping into his path. She tilted her chin and smiled the smile that had buried 2 men. "What a rare pleasure. We never see you in town. You must be terribly lonely up on that mountain." Caleb looked at her the way a man looks at a fence post. "Move," he said. Cordelia's smile cracked but held. "I only meant—" "I said move." She moved. Behind her, Josephine Whitmore, the judge's daughter, let out a high, sharp giggle. 22, blonde, and cruel in the way only pretty girls in small towns can be. She leaned toward Cordelia and whispered just loud enough for the room to hear. "He walks like a lame mule. All that gold and he can't buy a decent pair of boots?" 3 men by the Cracker Barrel laughed. Caleb's jaw tightened under his beard. His knuckles went white on the counter edge. He was a man who had faced grizzlies and blizzards and gunfire without flinching. But the laughter of small people in clean clothes could still draw blood. He grabbed his whiskey from Pritchard, threw coins on the counter, and turned to leave. His boot caught the edge of a barrel. He stumbled, didn't fall, but stumbled, and that was enough. More laughter. Caleb's hand drifted toward his hip. Not to the gun, to the door. He was going to leave, walk out and never come back. Let them rot in their pathetic little town with their pathetic little lives. "Sit down." The voice came from the back of the store. It wasn't loud. It wasn't timid. It was the voice of someone who had made a decision and wasn't interested in discussing it. From behind a stack of flour sacks, a woman stepped forward. She was short, barely 5'2", and she was heavy. Not plump, not stout. Heavy. The kind of heavy that made men look away and women whisper. She wore a gray cotton dress, washed so many times it had no color left. Her hair was reddish-brown, pulled back in a braid that had come half undone. Her hands were thick, calloused, stained with leather dye. Agnes McAllister. The town called her Round Aggie. Caleb looked at her. "Your boot's gone," Aggie said. She pointed to a wooden crate near the potbelly stove. "Sit. You keep walking on that, you'll lose toes. I didn't ask what you need. I told you to sit." Something in her voice. Something that didn't beg or flatter or giggle. Caleb sat. Aggie didn't flutter around him. She didn't make small talk. She knelt in front of him, and it wasn't easy. Her knees protested. Her breath came short. But she knelt, and she took his ruined boot off his foot with hands that were careful and sure. Cordelia Ashworth watched from the fabric section, her eyes narrowing. "Oh my," Josephine whispered to her. "The mule and the cow. What a pair." Aggie heard it. Caleb saw the flinch travel through her shoulders. But her hands didn't stop. She pulled a heavy curved needle and a spool of waxed sinew from her apron pocket, the tools of her dead mother's trade, and she went to work. The store fell quiet. For 15 minutes, nobody spoke. The only sounds were the ticking of the mantel clock, the creak of the floorboards, and the steady rhythm of Aggie's needle pulling through leather. She didn't just patch the tear. She reinforced the whole sole with a double welt stitch, the kind of work a master cobbler in St. Louis would charge $5 for. She worked the way her mother had taught her. If the inside ain't as strong as the outside, it'll fall apart the first time it rains. That's true for boots. That's true for people. Caleb watched her. He tried not to. He drank his whiskey and stared at the wall, but his eyes kept coming back to her bent head, to the sure movements of her fingers, to the way she bit her lower lip when she concentrated. She wasn't performing. She wasn't trying to impress him. She was just fixing what was broken because it needed fixing. When she finished, she bit the thread clean with her teeth and set his foot down on the floor. "Try it," she said, using the barrel to push herself up. She was breathing hard. Her face was flushed. Caleb stood. He stamped his foot once, twice. The boot was solid. Better than solid. It felt like it had been made for him by someone who understood what a boot was for. He reached into his coat and pulled out a gold nugget. Not a flake, not a pinch of dust. A nugget the size of a robin's egg, worth maybe $60. He held it out to her. Aggie looked at the gold. Then she looked at him. "No," she said. The word landed in the quiet store like a stone in a pond. "Take it," Caleb growled. "I didn't do it for money, Mr. Thornton." Her voice was shaking, but she held her ground. "I did it because your boot was broke and it's a long ride back up the mountain. Keep your gold." She turned and walked back toward the storeroom. "Wait," Caleb said. Aggie stopped but didn't turn around. "What's your name?" "Agnes McAllister." "Who taught you to stitch like that?" "My mother. She's dead." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. She'd have charged you." She disappeared into the back room. The door closed softly behind her. Caleb Thornton stood in the middle of Pritchard's General Store, holding a gold nugget nobody wanted, staring at a closed door. He felt something he hadn't felt in 7 years, and he didn't have a name for it yet. Then he looked at Cordelia Ashworth and Josephine Whitmore. They were staring at the nugget. Their eyes were wet with wanting. Caleb put the gold back in his pocket. He picked up his nails. He walked out. The story reached every ear in Copper Ridge before sundown. That was the nature of small towns. Words traveled faster than horses, and gossip was the only currency that never ran dry. By nightfall, every tongue in town was wagging. The phantom came down from the mountain. He's got gold, big gold, and Round Aggie touched his foot. At the Red Dog Saloon, Sheriff Walt Brogan propped his boots on his desk and laughed so hard he nearly choked on his chewing tobacco. "The Phantom and Round Aggie," Brogan wheezed. "That's rich. He probably thought she was a grizzly and felt right at home." The deputies laughed. The drunks at the bar laughed. It was the best joke Copper Ridge had heard all year. Nobody was laughing at the McAllister shack. The place sat at the dead end of Miners Row, a listing clapboard box with a roof that leaked and a porch that sagged. Inside, Hector McAllister was breaking things. He was a thin man, Hector, wiry and mean, with the yellowed fingers of a lifelong drunk and the shaking hands of a man who owed money to people who didn't ask twice. "You turned down gold!" Hector screamed, slamming an empty bottle on the table so hard it cracked. "A nugget, Aggie. Emmett Pritchard said it was worth $60. $60, and you told him no." Aggie stood by the stove. She was heating water for beans, same as every night. Beans and bread and silence, and her father's rage. "It wasn't mine to take, Pa. I fixed a boot, that's all." "That's all?" Hector kicked his chair back and crossed the room in 3 steps. He grabbed her arm, his bony fingers digging into the flesh above her elbow. "I owe Lem Sutter $40 for cards. 40. He said if I don't pay by Friday, he's taking my fingers. You understand that? My fingers, Aggie." "Let go of me, Pa." "You stupid, useless—" Hector raised his hand. "Hit me," Aggie said quietly. "Go ahead." "But I still ain't taking gold from a stranger for doing what's decent." Hector's hand hovered. He wanted to hit her. She could see it in his eyes, that old familiar calculation. Is she worth the trouble? She always had been before, but tonight something in her face stopped him. Maybe it was the way she looked straight at him instead of the floor. Maybe he was just too tired. He dropped his hand. He grabbed his hat from the hook and yanked open the door. "You'll regret this, girl. When Sutter comes for my fingers, that'll be on your soul." He slammed the door hard enough to rattle the window glass. Aggie heard his boots crunching down the gravel path toward the saloon. She stood very still for a long time. Then she sat down at the table, put her hands flat on the rough wood, and looked at them. They were good hands, strong hands, her mother's hands. She didn't cry. She'd used up her tears years ago. 3 days passed. Caleb didn't come back to town. Aggie went back to work in the storeroom of Pritchard's General Store, sorting inventory and mending harnesses for 20 cents apiece. It was honest work, and Pritchard let her eat the crackers that went stale, so she kept her head down and her mouth shut. On Monday morning, a boy from the livery stable came running into the store, breathless. "He's back! The Phantom's back! He's at the blacksmith!" Aggie's needle stopped. She didn't move. An hour later, the door to Pritchard's opened and closed. Heavy boots, the smell of pine smoke and leather and mountain air. The floorboards groaned under his weight. "Where's the girl who fixed my boot?" Pritchard coughed. "She's in the back, Mr. Thornton, but she's working, and I'd prefer—" "I wasn't talking to you." Aggie came out from the storeroom. She wiped her hands on her apron and looked up at him. He filled the door frame like a wall. "Mr. Thornton." "Miss McAllister." "Your boot holding up?" "It is." He paused. Caleb Thornton was not a man who paused. "I brought you something." He held out a leather satchel. Aggie didn't take it. "I told you, I don't want— It ain't gold. Open it." Aggie took the satchel. She untied the cord and looked inside. Her breath caught. Tools. A full set of leatherworking tools. A round knife. A stitching groover. An edge beveler. Awls in 3 sizes. And a bone folder. They were German-made. Expensive. The kind of tools her mother used to talk about, but could never afford. "I ordered them from a catalog last winter," Caleb said. "Had them shipped from Chicago. They were meant for a saddler I hired, but he ran off to California chasing some fool's dream. They've been sitting in a box for 6 months." Aggie ran her finger over the round knife. Her hand was trembling. "I can't take these. You're the only person within 200 miles who'd know what to do with them. It ain't charity, Miss McAllister. It's practicality. I need someone who can mend leather worth a damn, and you're the best I've seen." Aggie looked up at him. His gray-blue eyes were steady. There was no pity in them, no mockery, just a man stating a fact. "Why?" she asked. "Why what?" "Why are you being kind to me?" Caleb frowned. He looked genuinely confused by the question. "Because you were kind to me first," he said. "And nobody's been kind to me in a long time." The silence that followed was thick and warm, like bread rising. Cordelia Ashworth chose that exact moment to sweep into the store. She was wearing a new dress, cream-colored, with blue ribbon trim, and she had brought a pie. Apple. She held it out like a weapon. "Mr. Thornton," Cordelia said, ignoring Aggie entirely. "I heard you were in town, and I thought you might enjoy a home-cooked meal. A man living alone on a mountain must get so tired of his own cooking." Caleb looked at the pie. He looked at Cordelia. He looked at Aggie. "I appreciate the thought, Mrs. Ashworth," Cordelia beamed, "but I already have plans." Caleb turned back to Aggie. "Miss McAllister, would you do me the honor of having supper with me at the hotel dining room tonight? I'd like to discuss a business arrangement." The pie in Cordelia's hands might as well have turned to ash. Her smile collapsed inward like a mine shaft. Josephine Whitmore, who had been lingering by the door, hoping to catch Caleb's eye, let out a strangled little gasp. Aggie felt the blood rush to her face. She felt every eye in the store land on her like a physical weight. I'm not dressed for—" "You're dressed fine," Caleb said. 7 o'clock? Aggie swallowed. She looked at the tools in her hands. She looked at the mountain man who had come down from the clouds twice in 1 week, for the first time in 7 years. 7 o'clock, she said. Caleb nodded. He tipped his hat to Cordelia on his way out. "Ma'am?" He didn't look back. The door closed behind him. The silence in the store was so thick you could have stitched it. Cordelia Ashworth set the pie down on the counter with shaking hands. She looked at Aggie, and for the first time, Aggie saw something in the widow's eyes that wasn't contempt or amusement. It was fear. "Well," Cordelia said, her voice like ice on glass. "Isn't that something?" She picked up her pie and walked out. The bell jangled. The door slammed. Emmett Pritchard leaned across the counter and stared at Aggie like she'd grown a second head. "What in God's name just happened?" he whispered. Aggie clutched the leather satchel to her chest and felt her heart hammering against the tools inside. "I don't know," she said, "but I reckon I need to wash my hair." That evening, the dining room of the Copper Ridge Hotel became the most watched room in Montana Territory. Caleb Thornton sat at a corner table in a clean shirt. It was the only clean shirt he owned, and it strained across his shoulders like it was begging for mercy. His beard was trimmed, not neat, but trimmed. His hair was tied back with a leather cord. He'd washed his hands twice, and they still looked like they could crush a man's skull. Aggie arrived at 7:10 because she'd changed her dress 3 times and hated herself for caring. She wore her mother's Sunday dress, blue calico with white buttons, let out twice at the seams and still tight. Her hair was down, falling in reddish-brown waves past her shoulders. She'd found a ribbon. Every head in the dining room turned. Caleb stood up when she walked in. He pulled out her chair. The whispers started immediately. From the corner booth, 3 ranch wives leaned together like a conspiracy. At the bar, 2 cowboys elbowed each other and grinned. The hotel clerk pretended to study his ledger while his ears stretched toward the corner table. "Thank you for coming," Caleb said. "Thank you for asking." Aggie sat with her hands in her lap, her back straight. She looked at the white tablecloth, the candle, the silverware. "I ain't never eaten in a hotel before." "Me neither," Caleb said. "We'll figure it out together." Something in his voice made her look up. He wasn't smiling, exactly, but the hard lines around his eyes had softened, just barely, like rock worn down by water. They ordered. Steak for him, trout for her. They talked. Not about the weather, not about the town. Caleb asked about her leatherwork. He asked how she'd learned the double welt stitch. He asked about her mother. "She used to say," Aggie told him, turning a fork in her fingers, "that you can tell everything about a person by how they treat things that are broken. Some people throw broken things away. Some people try to fix them. And some people," she paused, "some people look at something broken and see what it could become." Caleb set down his knife. He looked at her across the candlelight. Really looked at her. Not past her, not through her. At her. "Your mama was a smart woman," he said. "She was the best person I ever knew." "What about your pa?" Aggie's face changed. The warmth left it like heat leaving a stone. "My pa's a drunk who blames me for my mother dying in childbirth. He owes money to every card sharp between here and Billings. He hits me when he's sober enough to aim." She said it flat. No self-pity, just facts. Caleb's hand tightened on his glass. The whiskey trembled. "He hits you. That ain't your concern, Mr. Thornton." "Caleb. Mr. Thornton." "Caleb. And it is my concern." "Why?" He didn't answer right away. He drank his whiskey. He set the glass down. He looked at the candle flame like it held a map he was trying to read. "Because 7 years ago," he said quietly, "I was an Army scout. I led soldiers to places they had no right to be. I watched good people get hurt because men with power decided they were worth less than dirt." He met her eyes. "I swore I'd never watch that happen again and do nothing." Aggie studied his face. The scar, the hard lines, the gray-blue eyes that had seen too much. "You came down from the mountain for nails and whiskey," she said slowly. "But that ain't really why you came down, is it?" Caleb leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I came down because I've been alone long enough to know the difference between solitude and hiding. I've been hiding, Miss McAllister, and I'm tired of it." The candle flickered between them. Aggie felt something crack open inside her chest. Not breaking. Opening. Like a door that had been locked so long she'd forgotten it was there. "Aggie," she said. "What?" "If I'm calling you Caleb, you're calling me Aggie." He almost smiled. Not quite, but close. "Aggie," he said, and the way he said it made it sound like a word that had been waiting a long time to be spoken. Outside the hotel, standing in the shadow of the porch awning, Cordelia Ashworth watched them through the window. The candlelight made them glow. The mountain man and the town outcast, leaning toward each other like two trees that had been growing toward the same sun their whole lives. Cordelia's hands were fists inside her silk gloves. "This," she whispered to the darkness, "will not stand." She turned on her heel and walked toward the judge's house. She had work to do. Cordelia Ashworth didn't knock on Judge Harlan Whitmore's door. She walked in like she owned the place. And in a way, she did. She'd been lending the judge money for 2 years, ever since his silver investments in Nevada went belly up and left him drowning in debt he couldn't let the town see. Whitmore was sitting behind his desk with a glass of brandy and a ledger full of numbers that didn't add up. He looked up when Cordelia swept in, and the expression on his face was the expression of a man who owed his landlord rent. "We have a problem," Cordelia said, pulling off her gloves one finger at a time. "It's 11 o'clock at night, Cordelia." "Caleb Thornton took Agnes McAllister to dinner at the hotel. He pulled out her chair. He looked at her like she was made of moonlight." Whitmore set down his brandy. "So?" "So?" Cordelia's voice could have frozen the creek. "That man has more silver in his mountain than the U.S. Mint. I have spent 3 years positioning myself. 3 years of pies and smiles and Sunday church and every performance a widow can give." And he walks past me like I'm wallpaper and sits down with the fat girl from Miners Row. "What do you want me to do about it?" "I want you to think, Harlan. If Thornton marries that girl, his money stays on the mountain. Your debts don't get paid. My debts don't get paid. The railroad spur you promised the territorial governor doesn't get built. We both hang." Whitmore's face went gray. He picked up his brandy and drained it. "He won't marry her," Whitmore said. "He's a loner. He probably just felt sorry for her. He gave her German leather tools worth $40. That ain't pity, Harlan. That's courtship." "How do you know about the tools?" "Because I make it my business to know everything that happens in this town. And right now, I'm telling you, if we don't act fast, that mountain man is going to do something foolish and permanent, and we'll be left with nothing." Whitmore opened his desk drawer. He pulled out a telegram. "My nephew is coming to town next week, Wade Kirby. He's been working the gambling halls in Deadwood. I know who Wade is, a card cheat with a pretty face. He's more than that. He's useful." Whitmore slid the telegram across the desk. "If Thornton gets attached to the McAllister girl, we'll need to shake that attachment loose. Wade can be very convincing with women." Cordelia picked up the telegram. She read it twice. A smile spread across her face, slow and cold. "Get him here faster," she said. The next morning, Aggie woke up on the floor of the McAllister shack with a boot print on her rib cage. Hector had come home at 3 a.m, drunk past reason. He'd kicked open her door, screaming about the dinner at the hotel. Half the town had told him about it. The other half had laughed at him about it. His daughter eating steak with the richest man in Montana while he scraped for whiskey money. It burned him worse than the liquor. He'd kicked her twice before she curled into a ball, and he lost interest and passed out on the kitchen floor. Aggie lay still until she heard his snoring. Then she got up, slow and careful, pressing her hand against her ribs. Nothing broken. She knew the difference by now. She washed her face in the basin. She looked at her reflection in the cracked mirror. Same face, same round cheeks, same tired eyes. But something was different. Last night, a man had pulled out her chair. A man had listened to her talk about her mother. A man had said her name like it meant something. She braided her hair. She put on her work dress. She walked to Pritchard's store in the pale morning light, and she didn't limp, even though it hurt. Caleb was already there. He was standing outside, leaning against the post where gunpowder was tied. He had a bundle under his arm. When he saw her coming up the boardwalk, he straightened. "Morning," he said. "Morning." He looked at the way she was holding her left side. His eyes narrowed. "What happened to your ribs?" "Nothing. I fell." "You fell." "I'm clumsy." "You're a liar, Aggie McAllister." She stopped walking. "Excuse me?" "You've got the steadiest hands I've ever seen. You don't fall. Someone knocked you down." Caleb stepped closer. His voice dropped. "Was it your pa?" "I told you, that ain't your—" "Was it your pa?" Aggie's chin trembled. She clamped her jaw and killed it. "Yes." Caleb's face did something terrible. It went completely still, the kind of still that comes before a rock slide. He turned toward Miners Row. "Where are you going?" Aggie grabbed his arm. It was like grabbing an oak branch. "Caleb, don't." "I'm going to have a conversation with your father." "You're going to kill him." "I said conversation." "Caleb Thornton, you look at me." She stepped in front of him, 5'2", blocking 6'5", her hand flat on his chest. "You go down there and beat my father, and Sheriff Brogan locks you up. The judge throws the book at you. Cordelia Ashworth smiles all the way to your silver mine. Is that what you want?" Caleb looked down at her hand on his chest. He could feel her trembling through his shirt. "No," he said. "Then don't give them the excuse." He stood there, breathing hard, the rage rolling off him like heat from a forge. Aggie didn't move. She kept her hand on his chest until his breathing slowed. "Your pa owes money," Caleb said. $40 to Lem Sutter, more to others." "How much total?" "I don't know. Maybe 100. "I'll pay it." "No." "Aggie." "No. You pay his debts. He just makes new ones. You can't fix a man who don't want fixing." She pulled her hand back. "I can take care of myself, Caleb. I've been doing it since I was 12. "I know you can. That ain't the point." "Then what is the point?" Caleb opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He looked like a man trying to say something he'd never said before and couldn't find the shape of the words. "The point," he said slowly, "is that I don't want you to have to." Aggie stared at him. The morning light was hitting his face, and she could see every line, every scar, every year of loneliness carved into his skin. And underneath all of it, something raw, something that scared him worse than any grizzly. "Come to the mountain," Caleb said. "Today. I want to show you something." "I have work." "Pritchard can survive one day without you sorting his nails." "People will talk." "People already talk. Come anyway." Aggie looked at the store. She looked at the road that led to Miners Row, to her father's shack, to the same gray life she'd been living for 26 years. She looked at the mountain. "Let me get my hat," she said. The ride up took 3 hours. Caleb put her on gunpowder and walked beside the horse, leading him by the bridle up the narrow switchback trail. He didn't complain about walking. He didn't make her feel heavy or burdensome. He walked like a man who had somewhere to be and was glad for the company. They talked the whole way up. Caleb told her about the mine. He'd found the silver vein 4 years ago, a thick seam running through the granite like a river. He'd hired a crew of 8 men to work it, trustworthy men he paid well and housed in cabins near the mine entrance. "How much is it worth?" Aggie asked. "More than I can spend in 3 lifetimes." "Then why do you live like a hermit?" "Because money doesn't fix what's broken inside a man. It just makes the silence louder." Aggie thought about that for a long time. When they reached the cabin, she understood. It was beautiful. Not grand, not fancy, but solid and warm and full of books. Shelves lined every wall. Shakespeare, Plato, geological surveys, Dickens, a worn copy of Walden with notes in the margins. "You've read all these?" Aggie whispered, running her finger along the spines. "Twice, most of them. Some 3 times. Caleb stood in the doorway, watching her. "My mother was a school teacher in Virginia before the war. She believed a man who didn't read was only half alive. My mother believed the same about a woman who couldn't work with her hands. Smart women, our mothers. They'd have liked each other." Caleb nodded. Something passed between them, an understanding that didn't need words. They were both children of strong women who had died too soon, raised by the wreckage of weak men. He made coffee. She sat at his table. And then he told her the thing he'd brought her up the mountain to hear. "I'm in trouble, Aggie." She set down her cup. "What kind?" "The legal kind. Judge Whitmore has been skimming from the mining contracts. He takes a cut from every claim filed in the territory, and he's been double filing on my claim, selling shares to investors back east that don't exist. I've got proof, letters, ledgers, a telegram from the territorial governor's office. Why haven't you gone to the law? Whitmore is the law, and Sheriff Brogan is his man. I sent a wire to the U.S. Marshal's office in Helena 6 months ago. They're investigating, but these things move slow. Meanwhile, the judge is getting desperate. He knows I know. That's why Cordelia Ashworth has been circling me like a vulture. She's in on it. She's been laundering his money through her late husband's cattle company." Aggie's mind was racing. "So when Cordelia was bringing you pies and batting her eyelashes, she was trying to get close enough to find out what I know. If she married me, she'd have legal access to my records, my mine, everything. And instead you had dinner with me. And instead I had dinner with you." Aggie felt cold despite the July heat. "Caleb, if these people are stealing and laundering money, they're dangerous. Why are you telling me this?" Caleb reached into a wooden box on the shelf. He pulled out a leather folder thick with papers. "Because I need someone I trust to hold these documents. Someone they'd never suspect. Someone smart enough to read them and brave enough to keep them safe. You've known me less than a week. I've known you long enough." "How? How can you know that?" "Because you knelt on a hard floor to fix a stranger's boot and wouldn't take gold for it. Because your father beats you and you still get up every morning and go to work. Because you look people in the eye when they insult you. That tells me everything." Aggie looked at the leather folder. She looked at Caleb. She thought about her father's shack and the boot prints and the watery beans and the 26 years of being invisible.
"If I do this," she said, "and they find out, they'll destroy me."
"They won't find out."
"But if they do?"
"Then I'll burn this whole territory to the ground before I let them touch you." He said it quiet. He said it the way a man says something he's already decided. The way gravity decides which way a rock falls. Aggie picked up the folder. She opened it. She read the first page, her eyes moving fast. She was a better reader than most men in town, though none of them knew it.
"Caleb,"
she said after a minute,
"this is worse than you think. These contracts show the judge sold mineral rights on your land to a company in Chicago. If they file with the territorial office before you do,
they'll own my mine."
"They'll own your mine."
Caleb sat down hard. "How long do we have?"
"Based on these dates, maybe 3 weeks, maybe less."
"Then we don't have time to wait for the marshals."
"No, we don't."
They looked at each other across the table, the coffee going cold between them.
"I have an idea," Aggie said, "but you ain't going to like it."
"Tell me."
"Marry me."
The words fell out of her mouth before she could catch them. She went red to the roots of her hair. Caleb stared at her.
"Now hear me out,"
she said fast, her hands gripping the edge of the table.
"Under territorial law, a wife has equal claim to her husband's property. If you file a joint claim with a spouse, It supersedes any prior third-party filing. The Chicago company's claim becomes void the moment you register a marital property deed. Caleb was still staring. "I read the law books in Pritchard's back room," Aggie said, her voice shaking. "I've read them all. I know this works. It's the only thing that works in 3 weeks." "You want to marry me to save my mine." "I want to marry you to save your mine. And maybe—" She stopped. She looked at the table. "And maybe because you're the first person who ever asked my name." The cabin was quiet. A jay called outside. The coffee sat cold. Caleb reached across the table. He took her hand. His hand swallowed hers completely, rough and scarred and warm. "I was going to ask you," he said. "That's the other reason I brought you up here." Aggie looked up. Her eyes were full. "You were?" "I had a speech planned. It was terrible. Something about boots and slippers." He squeezed her hand. "But your way is better. You're smarter than me, Aggie. You've always been smarter than me." "That ain't hard." He almost smiled. Almost. "Will you? Knowing what it means? Knowing they'll come after us?" "I've been getting knocked down my whole life, Caleb Thornton. At least this time, I'd be getting knocked down next to somebody worth standing back up for." He stood up. He still had her hand. He pulled her to her feet and looked down at her. She looked up at him. 5'2" and 6'5", and the whole world between them and against them. "Tomorrow," Caleb said. "We ride down and do it tomorrow." "Tomorrow's fine." "You'll need a ring." "I don't need a ring." Caleb reached inside his shirt and pulled a leather cord from around his neck. On it hung a ring of hammered Spanish gold, set with a rough-cut ruby the size of a thumbnail. It caught the light and burned like a small red star. "My grandmother's," Caleb said. "She carried it from Santa Fe to Virginia in her boot heel during the war. She told my mother that any ring worth wearing should survive a hard road." He slid it onto Aggie's finger. It fit like it had been waiting for her. Aggie held up her hand. The ruby glowed against her work-roughened skin. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," she said. "Second most," Caleb said. And this time, he did smile. They came down the mountain the next morning. Caleb rode Gunpowder with Aggie sitting in front of him, his arms around her. His buffalo hide coat draped over her shoulders even in the July heat, because he was a man who protected what was his and didn't care if it made sense. Main Street stopped breathing when they appeared. The blacksmith's hammer went silent. The barber came out with a razor still in his hand. 2 women on the boardwalk grabbed each other's arms. A dog stopped barking. Caleb dismounted in front of the courthouse. He lifted Aggie down, his hands gentle on her waist. She was shaking. He leaned close to her ear. "Head up. You're with me now." They walked into Judge Whitmore's office. The judge was eating breakfast at his desk, egg on his mustache. He nearly choked. "Thornton, what are you doing here?" "I'm getting married," Caleb said. Whitmore looked at Aggie, looked at the ruby on her finger. His face went through 6 colors in 3 seconds. "Married? To her?" "To Mrs. Caleb Thornton, as of about 10 minutes from now. Do your job, Harlan." Whitmore's hands shook as he pulled out the marriage register. His mind was racing. Cordelia would need to know. The Chicago filing would need to be accelerated. Everything they'd planned was crumbling. But he couldn't refuse, not with Caleb Thornton's gray-blue eyes boring into him like drill bits. "Do you, Caleb James Thornton, take this woman?" "I do." "I haven't finished the—" "I do. Move it along." "Do you, Agnes Marie McAllister?" "I do," Aggie said. Her voice was clear, steady. The voice of a woman who had decided. "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I pronounce you man and wife." Caleb looked at Aggie. Aggie looked at Caleb. He leaned down and kissed her, right there in front of the judge who was trying to rob him and the law books that were going to save him. It was a short kiss, a promise, not a performance. But it was real.
They walked out of the courthouse into the hard white sunlight. 30 people stood in the street, staring. Cordelia Ashworth was at the front, her face a porcelain mask hiding murder. Caleb raised Aggie's hand. The ruby blazed. "My wife," he said, and his voice hit every wall on Main Street. "Mrs. Caleb Thornton. Any man or woman who disrespects her answers to me." Nobody said a word. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Aggie stood in the silence, her hand in his, the ruby burning on her finger. And she felt something she had never felt before in 26 years of living. She felt seen. 3 blocks away, in the shadow of the livery stable, a man stepped off the afternoon stage from Deadwood. He was lean, dark-haired, handsome in a way that made women look twice and smart men check their wallets. He wore a black coat and a silver watch chain, and a smile that never reached his eyes. Wade Kirby tipped his hat to a passing woman, lit a cigarette, and looked up the street toward the courthouse where the crowd was still gathered. "Well now," he said to no one, "looks like I'm right on time." Wade Kirby spent his first 3 days in Copper Ridge the way a rattlesnake spends the hour before it strikes. Still, watching, learning where the warm bodies moved. He played cards at the Red Dog Saloon. He bought drinks for the miners. He tipped his hat to every woman he passed and remembered every name after hearing it once. By Wednesday, half the town thought he was charming. By Thursday, the other half agreed. On Friday morning, he sat across from Cordelia Ashworth in Judge Whitmore's study and laid out his assessment like a hand of poker. "The girl is the weak point," Wade said, turning a silver dollar across his knuckles. "Not because she's stupid. She's sharp. Sharper than you told me." "She reads law books for entertainment," Cordelia said bitterly. "She's a fat seamstress who thinks she's a lawyer. She's a woman who just married the most feared man in the territory and didn't flinch doing it. That ain't weakness. That's spine." Wade caught the coin and held it. "But she's got one crack. She don't believe she deserves him." Whitmore leaned forward. "How do you know that?" "Because I watched her at the general store yesterday. Thornton was buying supplies. 2 ranch wives walked past and whispered something. Aggie's whole body changed. Shoulders dropped. Eyes went to the floor. She shrunk. Took her 30 seconds to straighten back up." "So she's insecure," Cordelia said. "We knew that." "She's not insecure. She's healing. And healing people are the easiest to break because they remember exactly how the pain felt." Wade leaned back. "I don't need to seduce her. I just need to make Thornton think someone did." "That's what I suggested," Cordelia said. "No. You suggested a clumsy setup in an alley. That won't work on Thornton. He's not a jealous fool. He's a predator. He reads people better than most. If the scene looks staged, he'll smell it." "Then what do you propose?" Wade smiled. It was the smile of a man who had destroyed better people than these and slept fine after. "I propose we don't fake an affair. I propose we fake a secret. Something Aggie is hiding from Thornton. Something that makes him doubt not her faithfulness, but her honesty." "What kind of secret?" "The documents." The room went cold. Whitmore straightened in his chair. "What documents?" "Judge, I've been in town 5 days, and I already know Thornton has evidence against you. The miners talk. Your clerk drinks. People ain't careful with their words when they think the new card player is just passing through. Wade pocketed his coin. Thornton gave those documents to someone for safekeeping. My guess is his brand new wife. Whitmore's face was the color of old candle wax. If those papers reach the marshal, they won't, because here's what we're going to do. We're going to make Caleb Thornton believe that Aggie stole those documents and sold them. Not to the marshals, to us. Why would she do that? Cordelia asked. She wouldn't, but her father would. Wade looked at them both. Hector McAllister is a drunk who'd sell his own shadow for whiskey money. What if Hector came to Aggie begging for help? What if Aggie, out of guilt for the father she can't stop loving, showed him where the documents were? And what if Hector, being Hector, went straight to you with them? She'd never show her father those papers, Cordelia said. She doesn't have to actually do it. We just need Thornton to believe she did. We get Hector to tell Thornton that Aggie gave him the papers. Hector's her blood. Why would her own father lie about her? Because we pay him to, Whitmore said, understanding dawning on his face. Because we pay him to, and we make sure Thornton finds out the documents are missing at the same time Hector delivers his story. Thornton won't know who to believe, and doubt is all we need. One crack in that trust, and the whole thing falls apart. Cordelia smiled. And once they're separated? Once they're separated, the marriage is contested. The joint property filing becomes vulnerable, and your Chicago friends can push their claim through before anyone blinks. Whitmore poured 3 glasses of brandy. How much do you need? 500 for me, 50 for Hector. And you'll need to move fast. The longer those two are together, the harder they'll be to break. How fast? Sunday, Wade said. Thornton rides up to the mine every Sunday to check on his crew. He'll be gone 6 hours. That's when we move. Cordelia raised her glass. To commerce. Wade raised his. To human nature. Saturday night, Caleb and Aggie ate supper in their room at the Copper Ridge Hotel. Caleb had bought the hotel outright 3 days after the wedding. He told Aggie it was an investment. She told him he just didn't want to pay someone to sleep in his own bed. They were learning each other. It was clumsy and strange and wonderful, like two people trying to dance who'd never heard music before. You eat like a man who thinks the food might run away, Aggie said, watching him tear into a steak. You eat like a bird who's afraid someone might notice. Aggie set down her fork. He was right. She'd spent her whole life eating small portions, eating fast, eating in corners where no one could watch and judge. Even now, married to a rich man, sitting in a hotel she owned, she ate like she was stealing. Old habits, she said. Break 'em. Caleb pushed the breadbasket toward her. You're not living in your father's house anymore. You eat what you want, when you want, as much as you want. That's an order. You can't order me to eat bread. I just did. I don't take orders, Caleb Thornton. I've noticed. She took a piece of bread. She buttered it. She ate it slowly, looking him in the eye the whole time, and something about the defiance in her face made him set down his knife and watch her like she was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. What? She said, her mouth full. Nothing. You're just you. That a good thing? That's the best thing. Aggie felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the stove. She changed the subject, because the way he was looking at her made it hard to breathe. I filed the joint property deed with the territorial office in Helena, she said. Sent it by express post Wednesday. Should arrive Monday. Caleb nodded. And the documents? Hidden. Safe. Where? The less you know, the safer they are. If Whitmore pressures you, you can honestly say you don't know where they are. Caleb frowned. I don't like not knowing.
I know.
But you married me for my brain, remember? Let me use it. He studied her. She held his gaze. He grunted. What she was learning was his version of, "You're right and I hate it." "I'm riding up to the mine tomorrow," he said. "Sunday check. I'll be gone most of the day."
I know. I'll be fine.
"Take the pistol I left in the drawer."
I have my leather knife.
"Aggie."
Fine. I'll take the pistol.
"Do you know how to use it?"
Point the loud end at the bad people and pull the little lever. Am I close?
Caleb pinched the bridge of his nose. "I'm teaching you to shoot when I get back."
Looking forward to it.
He reached across the table and took her hand. His thumb traced the ruby ring on her finger. "Lock the door. Don't let anyone in. Don't go to the store. Don't go anywhere."
You're worried.
"I'm cautious. There's a difference."
No, there ain't. Not with you.
He squeezed her hand. "I'll be back before dark."
You better be. I'm making biscuits.
He kissed her knuckles, the same gesture he'd made on Main Street, but this time it was private, just for her. And it meant more because of it. Sunday morning, Caleb left before dawn. Aggie heard Gunpowder's hooves on the road, the rhythm fading into the distance. She locked the door. She checked the pistol in the nightstand drawer. She sat at the writing desk with the law books she'd borrowed from Pritchard and began drafting a letter to the territorial governor's office. At 9 o'clock, someone knocked on the door. Aggie went still. She didn't answer. The knock came again, harder. Then a voice she knew too well. "Aggie, Aggie, please, it's me. Open the door." Her father. Aggie closed her eyes. She pressed her hands flat on the desk. "Aggie, I'm hurt. Please, I need help." She stood up. She walked to the door. She didn't open it. "Pa, you can't be here. Go home." "I can't go home. Lem Sutter's men found me. They beat me, Aggie. I'm bleeding." His voice cracked. "Please, I know I don't deserve your help. I know I've been terrible. But I'm your father." Aggie leaned her forehead against the door. She could hear him breathing, ragged, wet. She opened the door. Hector McAllister stood in the hallway, looking like he'd been dragged behind a horse. His left eye was swollen shut. Blood ran from a cut on his scalp. His shirt was torn. He was shaking.
"Oh, Pa!"
Aggie pulled him inside. She sat him in the chair and grabbed the water basin and a cloth. "They jumped me behind the saloon," Hector gasped. "Said I owed 60 now. Interest. Said next time they'd use a knife."
Hold still.
Aggie cleaned the cut on his head. It wasn't deep. The eye would bruise but heal. Whoever beat him had been thorough, but not lethal. Professional. Measured. Something about that bothered her.
"Pa, how did you know I was here?"
"Everyone knows you're at the hotel, Aggie. The whole town knows."
"How did you get past the front desk?"
"Backstairs. The clerk wasn't looking." Aggie wrung out the cloth. She looked at her father's face, the swollen eye, the trembling lip. He was pathetic. He was her blood. "How much do you need?" she heard herself say. $60.
"I don't have $60, Pa."
"But your husband—"
"My husband's money is his money. I don't steal from my husband."
"It ain't stealing if you ask him."
"He's not here."
"Then maybe—" Hector licked his cracked lips. "Maybe you've got something valuable, something you could trade, just to buy me time." Aggie stopped wiping. She looked at her father, really looked at him, past the blood and the bruises and the years of whiskey. His good eye shifted, just for a second, just the tiniest flick toward the writing desk where her papers were spread out. Aggie's blood went cold.
"Who sent you, Pa?"
"Nobody sent me. I told you, Sutter's men."
"Lem Sutter doesn't beat people on Sunday morning. He's at church every Sunday."
"I know because I used to watch him walk past our house, singing hymns, on his way to hit his wife. Hector's mouth opened and closed. "Who beat you, Pa? Was it real? Or did someone pay to make it look real?" "Aggie, you're talking crazy. Was it Wade Kirby?" Hector flinched. It was small, barely a twitch. But Aggie had spent 26 years reading her father's body for survival. She knew every tell he had. "You don't know what they'll do to me," Hector whispered. And now the tears were real. "The judge, Cordelia, they said if I didn't get you to show me where the papers were, they'd—" "The papers." Aggie stood up. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was iron. "That's what this is about. They sent you here to find Caleb's documents." "I didn't want to. I swear on your mother's grave. Don't you dare mention her. Don't you dare use her name in this room." Hector crumbled. He put his face in his bloody hands and sobbed. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm weak, Aggie. I've always been weak." "I know, Pa. I've always known." She walked to the window and looked down at the street. Her mind was moving fast, faster than her fear. They'd sent Hector to find the documents. That meant they didn't know where they were. That meant the documents were still safe. But it also meant they were getting desperate. Desperate people burn things down. "Pa," Aggie said, turning around, "I need you to listen very carefully. Can you do that?" Hector looked up, his one good eye red and streaming. "Go back to them. Tell them I showed you the documents. Tell them they're hidden under the floorboards in our hotel room, beneath the writing desk." "But there's nothing under those floorboards, Pa. I'm going to put something there. A leather folder that looks just like the real one. But the papers inside will be different." "Different how?" "Different enough. Will you do this?" "If they find out I lied—" "They won't find out. Not until it's too late." Aggie knelt in front of her father. She took his bloody hands. "Pa, I have never asked you for anything, not in 26 years. I fed you, I cleaned you, I took your beatings. I paid your debts with pennies I earned on my knees, mending other people's things. I am asking you now, one thing, one time. Be my father." Hector looked at his daughter, the girl he'd blamed for his wife's death. The girl he'd called useless, cow, burden. The girl who was kneeling in front of him with a ring worth more than his life on her finger and fire in her eyes. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, Aggie." She sent him out the back stairs. Then she moved. She took the real documents from their hiding place, not under the floorboards, but sewn into the lining of her leather work satchel. The one place no one in Copper Ridge would think to look, because no one in Copper Ridge thought Agnes McAllister had anything worth hiding. She wrapped the real documents in oilskin and placed them inside a tin box. She wrote a name on the outside. She sealed it with wax. Then she went to the writing desk and pulled out blank paper. For the next 2 hours, she forged. Not the documents themselves, but something better. She created a set of papers that looked like Caleb's evidence, but contained false dates, wrong names, and fabricated contracts that would lead Whitmore straight into a trap. If the judge used these papers to cover his tracks, he'd be filing false documents with the territorial office, adding forgery to his list of crimes. Aggie placed the forged papers in a leather folder identical to the real one. She pried up a loose floorboard under the desk and slid the folder in. She replaced the board. Then she sat down, picked up her leather tools, and waited. She didn't have to wait long. At 4 o'clock, the lock on the hotel room door clicked. It was a good lock, but it wasn't good enough for a man who'd spent 10 years opening other people's things. Wade Kirby stepped inside. He expected the room to be empty. Hector had told them Aggie went to the general store at 3 every afternoon. Aggie was sitting in the armchair facing the door. The pistol from the nightstand was in her lap. Wade stopped dead.
Close the door, Aggie said. You're letting the hall dust in.
Wade's charm didn't crack. He smiled, slow and easy, and closed the door behind him. Mrs. Thornton, I was looking for the clerk. Wrong room.
You picked my lock.
Door was open.
The door has a deadbolt I set myself. Try again.
Wade's smile thinned. He looked at the gun in her lap. You know how to use that?
My husband's teaching me. I'm a fast learner.
I don't doubt it. Wade leaned against the doorframe, hands visible, casual. Your father told us the papers are under the floorboards.
I know he did. I told him to say that.
Wade's smile disappeared entirely. Excuse me?
You heard me. I told my father exactly what to tell you, because I knew you'd come looking.
And I wanted to be here when you did. Why? Because I want you to deliver a message to Judge Whitmore and Cordelia Ashworth. Aggie stood up. She wasn't pointing the gun, but she was holding it, and her hand was steady. Tell them the papers are gone. Tell them I sent the originals to the U.S. Marshal's office in Helena by express post this morning. Tell them it's over. You're bluffing. Am I? Check under the floorboards if you want. Go ahead. Wade looked at her. He looked at the desk. He crossed the room and pulled up the loose board. The leather folder was there. He opened it, scanned the first page, and his face changed. Those are copies, useless ones. The originals are already on a stagecoach to Helena. Aggie walked to the door and opened it wide. Get out of my room, Mr. Kirby, and tell your employers that the next person who breaks into my home won't find me sitting in a chair. They'll find my husband, and he won't be holding a pistol. He'll be holding a rope. Wade Kirby looked at Agnes McAllister, the fat girl from Miners Row, the town joke, the woman everyone underestimated. He tucked the folder under his arm and walked out without another word. When his footsteps faded down the hall, Aggie closed the door. She locked it. She slid down the wall and sat on the floor with the pistol in her lap and her heart hammering so loud she was sure the whole hotel could hear it. She'd just bluffed a professional gambler. The originals weren't on a stagecoach. They were still in her satchel. But Wade didn't know that, and now he'd carry her lie straight to Whitmore and Cordelia like a lit fuse on a stick of dynamite. They'd panic. Panicked people make mistakes, and mistakes leave evidence. Aggie pressed her hand against her chest and felt the pounding slow. She thought about Caleb up on the mountain. She thought about the marshals in Helena. She thought about her mother's voice saying, "If the inside ain't as strong as the outside, it'll fall apart." "I ain't falling apart, Mama," she whispered. "Not today." At 6 o'clock, Caleb rode down from the mountain. He stabled gunpowder, climbed the stairs 2 at a time, and knocked on the door in the pattern they'd agreed on. 3 slow, 2 fast. Aggie opened the door. She looked at him. He looked at her. "Something happened," Caleb said. "Biscuits are ready," Aggie said. "Sit down. I need to tell you everything." She told him. All of it. Her father, Wade Kirby, the forged papers, the bluff. Caleb didn't speak for a long time after she finished. He sat in the chair by the window, with his hands on his knees and his jaw working under his beard. "You faced down Wade Kirby alone," he said finally. "I did. With my gun. With your gun that I don't know how to shoot. He could have killed you. He could have. He didn't. Because you outsmarted him." "Because I outsmarted him." Caleb looked at her. She braced for anger, for the lecture about staying safe, about locking the door, about never opening it for anyone. Instead, he stood up, crossed the room, took her face in his hands, and kissed her forehead. "You are the most terrifying woman I have ever met," he said.
Is that a compliment?
"It's a fact."
Good. Eat your biscuits.
He ate his biscuits, but his eyes kept going to the window, to the darkening street below, and his hand kept drifting to the Colt on his hip. "They'll come tonight," Caleb said quietly. "Whitmore thinks the originals are heading to Helena. He'll try to intercept the stage. When he finds out there are no papers on it, he'll know you bluffed. And then he'll come here with everything he's got." "I know," Aggie said. "I'm not leaving you alone again."
I know that too.
"We need to move the real documents tonight, somewhere no one will look." Aggie reached for her satchel. She pulled it open and showed him the oilskin package sewn into the lining. Caleb stared at it. "They've been in your bag this whole time?" "The safest hiding place is the one nobody thinks to search. Nobody in this town thinks Agnes McAllister has anything worth hiding. They're wrong. They've always been wrong." Caleb took the oilskin package. He held it in both hands like it weighed 100 pounds. "I know where to put these. Somewhere not even God could find them." "Where?" "My mine. Behind the silver vein. There's a sealed chamber only I know about. I cut it myself 3 years ago." "Then we ride tonight." "It's a 4-hour ride in the dark." "I married a man who lives on a mountain, Caleb. I ain't afraid of the dark." He looked at her in the lamplight, and something shifted behind his eyes. Something that had been locked away for 7 years cracked open, and what came through was not the ghost of the Beartooth Mountains. It was just a man. A man who had found the one person in the world who could match him, not in size or strength, but in the thing that mattered: grit. "Pack light," he said. "We ride in 20 minutes." They slipped out the back of the hotel at midnight. Caleb led Gunpowder through the back alleys, avoiding the main street. Aggie walked beside him, her satchel over her shoulder, the pistol in her belt. They were 2 blocks from the livery when a lantern flared in the darkness ahead. Sheriff Brogan stepped into the alley with 4 deputies. Each one held a rifle. "Going somewhere, Thornton?" Brogan called, his hand on his holster. Behind them, Aggie heard footsteps. She turned. Wade Kirby and 3 more men blocked the other end of the alley. They were boxed in. Caleb's hand went to his Colt. Aggie grabbed his wrist. "Don't," she whispered. "They want you to draw. They'll shoot you dead and call it self-defense." "Judge Whitmore has issued a warrant for your arrest," Brogan announced, walking closer. "Extortion, fraud, threatening a public official. You're coming with me, Thornton. Both of you." Caleb looked at the rifles. He looked at Aggie. He looked at the night sky above the rooftops of the town that was trying to kill them. "Both of us," Caleb repeated quietly. "Both of you." Caleb squeezed Aggie's hand once. Then he raised both hands, slowly, and stepped away from his horse. "Take us in, Brady. But you better pray those cells are strong." The deputies moved in. They took Caleb's gun. They took Aggie's pistol. They took the satchel from her shoulder. As Brogan reached for the bag, Aggie looked him dead in the eye. "Careful with that, Sheriff. What's inside is worth more than your life." Brogan hesitated, just for a second. Then he slung the satchel over his own shoulder and marched them toward the jailhouse. In the window of the judge's house, a curtain moved. Cordelia Ashworth watched the procession pass, her face lit by a single candle. "Finally," she whispered. She let the curtain fall and turned to Judge Whitmore, who was pouring himself a drink with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. "Get the satchel from Brogan tonight," Cordelia said. "Burn everything inside. By morning, there won't be a single piece of paper connecting you to anything." "And Thornton?" "Thornton is in a cell. His wife is in a cell. The documents are gone.
The Chicago company files their claim Monday morning. Cordelia picked up her gloves. By the time the marshals arrive, there'll be nothing left to investigate. She walked to the door. She paused. Oh, and Harlan? Make sure Hector McAllister disappears. We don't need a guilty drunk with a loose tongue ruining everything. Whitmore nodded. His hands were still shaking. In the Copper Ridge jailhouse, Caleb sat on the iron cot in his cell. Aggie sat on the cot in the cell next to his. A wall of iron bars separated them. "I'm sorry," Aggie said into the darkness. "For what?" "For getting us caught." "You didn't get us caught. They were waiting for us. Someone tipped them off." "My father." "Maybe, maybe not." "It was my father. I saw his boot prints in the mud behind the hotel. He was watching when we left." Her voice broke. "I trusted him, Caleb. After everything, I still trusted him." "That ain't weakness, Aggie. That's love." "Love is what got us locked up. Love is what's going to get us out." Aggie pressed her face against the cold iron bars that separated their cells. Caleb reached through and found her hand. "They took my satchel," Aggie said. "The real documents are in the lining. If Brogan gives it to Whitmore..." "Then Whitmore burns the evidence, and we've got nothing." "We've got nothing." The silence was heavy. The only sound was the dripping of water somewhere in the stone walls, and the distant howl of a coyote up on the ridge. Then Aggie laughed. Caleb turned his head. "What's funny?" "I sewed a second lining into that satchel, Caleb. The papers in the first lining are the forgeries. Same ones I showed Wade Kirby. They look real. They feel real. But they're poison. And the originals?" Aggie reached down with her free hand. She pulled up her skirt and unstrapped a flat oilskin pouch from her thigh. "Right here. Right where they've been since I left the hotel." Caleb stared at her through the bars. Then he dropped his head and laughed. A real laugh, deep and rolling. The first real laugh that Jailhouse had probably ever heard. "Agnes Marie Thornton," he said, "you are something else." "I'm your wife, and your wife don't put all her eggs in one basket." He squeezed her hand through the bars. "Now we just need to get out of here." "I'm working on that," Aggie said. "Give me an hour." Aggie didn't need an hour. She needed 40 minutes and a hairpin. The hairpin was her mother's, brass, thick-gauged, bent at the tip from years of holding heavy braids. Aggie had worn it every day since she was 14, tucked deep into the base of her braid, where no one could see it, and no deputy would think to search. She pulled it out in the dark. She straightened it with her teeth. Then she reached through the bars of her cell door and went to work on the lock. "Where'd you learn to pick locks?" Caleb whispered from the next cell. "Pritchard locks the storeroom at night. I used to sleep in there when Pa got bad. Had to let myself in." "You slept in a storeroom?" "It was warm, and it had crackers. Don't judge me." The lock clicked. Aggie pushed her cell door open, cringing at the groan of the hinges. She listened. The deputy on night watch was in the front office. She could hear him snoring through the wall. She moved to Caleb's cell. This lock was heavier, rustier. She worked it for 3 minutes, her fingers slippery with sweat. "If we get out of this alive," Caleb said, watching her hands, "I'm buying you a proper lockpick set. If we get out of this alive, I'm buying myself a bath." The lock gave. Caleb caught the door before it swung and eased it open without a sound. He stepped out and stood still, listening. The snoring continued. "The deputy has my Colt in the front desk drawer," Caleb said. "Leave it." "I need my gun, Aggie." "You need to not kill anyone tonight, Caleb. We walk out clean, or we don't walk out at all. The moment you fire a shot, we're fugitives. The marshals won't help fugitives." He hated it.
She could see his jaw grinding in the moonlight that came through the high, barred window. But he nodded. They moved to the back of the jailhouse. There was a door that led to a small yard where prisoners took their exercise. The yard was ringed by a wooden fence, 8 feet high. Caleb laced his fingers together and boosted Aggie up. She grabbed the top of the fence and hauled herself over, landing hard on the other side. Her ribs screamed where Hector's boot had bruised them a week ago. She bit her tongue and swallowed the pain. Caleb cleared the fence in one motion. He landed beside her, silent as a cat for a man his size. They were in the alley behind the jail. Main Street was to the left. The livery stable was 3 blocks north. Gunpowder was still there. "We can't take Main Street," Aggie said. "Too exposed." "Back alleys, along the creek bed." They ran. Not the desperate, panicked running of people who are scared, but the steady, ground-eating pace of people who know exactly where they're going and what's waiting if they don't get there. 2 blocks from the livery, Aggie grabbed Caleb's arm and yanked him into the shadow of a rain barrel. He opened his mouth. She clamped her hand over it. Footsteps. 2 men walking the boardwalk with rifles. Deputies on patrol. They pressed against the wall, breathing shallow. The deputies passed within 10 feet. One of them lit a cigarette. The match flared, throwing orange light across the alley. Aggie buried her face in Caleb's chest. He wrapped his arms around her, making them 1 shadow instead of 2. The match went out. The deputies moved on. They waited 60 seconds. Then they ran again. The livery stable was dark and smelled of hay and horse sweat. Old Tom Buckner, the stableman, slept in the loft. He was deaf in one ear and drunk most nights. They moved past his snoring body like ghosts. Gunpowder nickered when he saw Caleb. Caleb put his hand on the stallion's nose and whispered something Aggie couldn't hear. The horse went quiet. Caleb saddled him fast. Aggie checked the saddlebags. Her leather tools were still there. She'd left them that morning, and nobody had touched them because nobody cared about a fat girl's sewing kit. She pressed the oilskin pouch of documents deep into the bottom of the saddlebag, underneath the tools. Then she climbed up behind Caleb. "Where?" Caleb asked. "The telegraph office at the rail depot. You said the operator owes you a favor." "He does, but the depot is on the other side of town." "Then ride fast and ride quiet." Caleb kicked Gunpowder into a walk. They took the back road along Silver Creek, staying in the shadows of the cottonwood trees. The water gurgled beside them. A half moon hung over the bare-toothed peaks, turning the world silver and black. They were halfway to the depot when the church bells started ringing. Not the Sunday bell, not the wedding bell, the alarm bell. 3 fast rings, a pause, 3 more. The jailbreak had been discovered. "Go," Aggie said. Caleb didn't need to be told twice. He put his heels to Gunpowder and the stallion lunged forward, his hooves throwing mud. They tore along the creek bank at full gallop, branches slapping at their faces, the bell clanging behind them like a metal heartbeat. Lanterns were lighting up across town. Voices shouted. Dogs barked. Copper Ridge was waking up angry. They reached the rail depot in 4 minutes. Caleb pulled Gunpowder to a stop and jumped down. He hammered on the side door of the telegraph office. "Virgil, open up!" A light flickered inside. The door cracked open. A thin man with spectacles and a nightshirt peered out. Virgil Crane, the telegraph operator, 40 years old and nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. "Thornton, what in God's name? I need to send a wire, right now." "It's 1 in the morning. The line isn't—" "Virgil." Caleb grabbed the man by the nightshirt and lifted him onto his toes. "You owe me. I kept those rustlers from burning this depot last winter. I'm calling it in." Virgil looked at Caleb. He looked at Aggie on the horse. He heard the alarm bell. "Get inside," Virgil said. The telegraph machine sat on a desk cluttered with coffee cups and old newspapers. Virgil dropped into his chair and warmed up the line. His fingers were shaking. "Who am I sending to?" "U.S. Marshal's office, Helena," Caleb said. "Address it to Marshal James Davis." "What's the message?" Aggie stepped forward. She'd been composing it in her head since the jail cell. "Evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit murder by Judge Harlan Whitmore and Associates in Copper Ridge, Montana Territory. Originals secured. Subjects have falsely imprisoned federal witness Caleb Thornton and wife. Request immediate dispatch of marshal and deputies. Situation critical. Lives in danger. Signed, Caleb J. Thornton. Virgil's fingers flew over the key. The clicks filled the small room like mechanical rain. "It'll take time for a response," Virgil said. "Helena's 3 days' ride." "They can make it in 2 if they push," Caleb said. "Davis knows my name. He knows what I've been sending him." 2 days, Aggie said. "We need to survive 2 days." A gunshot cracked in the distance. Then another. Voices carried on the night air, getting closer. "They're searching the creek bank," Caleb said. Virgil went white. "If they find you here, they'll burn this depot with me in it." "They won't find us here. We're leaving," Caleb gripped Virgil's shoulder. "You never saw us. You were asleep. The machine sent nothing." "I was asleep. I saw nothing." Virgil was already pulling on his boots. "But Thornton, if you're heading up the mountain, don't take the main trail. Brogan posted 2 men at the trailhead yesterday." "How do you know?" "Because I know everything that comes through this wire. And Brogan sent a message to the territorial sheriff in Billings asking for reinforcements. He said there's a dangerous fugitive in the area. He'll have 20 men by Tuesday." 20 men, Aggie repeated, "plus his deputies, plus whoever the judge can hire off the street." Virgil looked at them both with something that might have been admiration or might have been pity. "You folks are in a real tight spot." "We've been in tight spots before," Aggie said. "Thank you, Virgil." They rode out the back of the depot and into the darkness along the rail line. Caleb pushed Gunpowder hard for the first mile, then slowed to save the horse's legs. They couldn't afford to lose their only mount. "There's an old mining trail on the north face," Caleb said. "It's steep and it hasn't been used in years. Brogan won't know about it. Can Gunpowder handle it with both of us?" "He'll have to." They rode in silence for a while. The alarm bell had stopped. Either they'd given up or they'd organized a real search party. Aggie pressed her cheek against Caleb's back and listened to his heartbeat. Steady. Always steady. "Caleb." "Yeah."
What happens if the marshals don't come?
"They'll come." "But if they don't? If the wire doesn't get through? If Davis is away? If the reinforcements from Billings get here first?" Caleb didn't answer for a long time. Gunpowder picked his way up the rocky trail, his hooves clattering on loose stone. "Then we disappear," Caleb said. "We take the documents and ride for Helena ourselves. Walk into the marshal's office and hand them over in person." "That's 150 miles through open country, with a posse behind us." "I've done it before. The Army taught me to move through land without being seen." "The Army taught you to move alone. You're not alone now." "No, I'm not." He reached back and squeezed her knee. "And I wouldn't trade that for anything." They reached the old mining trail just before dawn. It was brutal. Narrow, steep, choked with fallen rock and dead timber. Gunpowder grunted and strained, his muscles shaking under their combined weight. Aggie dismounted and walked beside the horse, grabbing roots and rocks to pull herself up the steeper sections. By the time they reached the cabin, the sun was cresting the peaks, and they were both covered in dust and sweat. Aggie's ribs throbbed. Her legs burned. She wanted to collapse on the cabin floor and sleep for a week. Instead, she washed her face, drank a cup of cold creek water, and started planning. "Show me the mine," she said. "You need rest." "I need the mine. Show me." Caleb led her a quarter-mile up a side canyon to the mine entrance. It was hidden behind a rockfall that looked natural, but wasn't. He moved 2 boulders that most men couldn't have budged, revealing a dark opening in the granite. They went inside. Caleb lit a lantern. The silver vein glinted in the walls like frozen lightning. He led her deep into the tunnel, past the main works, past the timbers and the ore carts, to a dead end. Here, Caleb pressed a specific spot on the rock wall. A section of stone swung inward on hidden iron hinges. Behind it was a small chamber, dry and cool, cut into solid granite. "I built this the year I found the vein," Caleb said. "Took me 3 months, working alone at night. Nobody knows about it. Not the miners, not Virgil. Nobody." Aggie took the oilskin pouch from the saddlebag. She placed it inside the chamber on a stone shelf. Then she stepped back. "Now nobody can touch them," she said. "Even if they burn the cabin. Even if they tear up every floorboard in Copper Ridge. The evidence is inside a mountain." Caleb sealed the chamber. He replaced the boulders at the mine entrance. They walked back to the cabin. Aggie sat at the table and spread out a piece of paper. "We have 2 days," she said. "Maybe less. Here's what we need." "What we need is guns and ammunition." "What we need is witnesses. Caleb, you can shoot every deputy in Montana, and it won't prove Whitmore is a thief. We need him to incriminate himself. We need him to come up here, to this mountain, and say out loud what he's done. Why would he do that? Because he thinks the documents are in my satchel, which is currently sitting in Sheriff Brogan's office. He's going to open that satchel tonight. He's going to find the forgeries, and the forgeries are going to tell him exactly what he wants to hear. That his secret is safe, that there's no evidence. So he relaxes. So he gloats. And a gloating man talks. All we need is the right audience. "The miners," Caleb said, understanding flooding his face. "My crew. They're loyal. They'll listen. 8 witnesses who can testify to a federal marshal. That's better than any piece of paper. But how do we get Whitmore up here? He's not going to ride up a mountain to confess." Aggie picked up the pen. She started writing. "We invite him. We send word that Caleb Thornton wants to negotiate, that you'll sign over the mine in exchange for dropping the charges and letting you and your wife leave the territory in peace. He'll never believe I'd give up the mine. He'll believe a desperate man would do anything to protect his wife. That's what he thinks you are. Desperate and stupid. Let him think it." Caleb watched her write. Her handwriting was precise and elegant. Nothing like what you'd expect from a girl who grew up in a shack on Miners Row. "You're not just smart, Aggie. You're dangerous. I'm a woman who's been underestimated her entire life. That's the most dangerous thing there is." He almost smiled. Almost. They sent the message down the mountain with one of Caleb's miners, a man named Pete Dawkins, who could be trusted with his life. Pete rode to town at noon and delivered the letter to Judge Whitmore's clerk. Then they waited. The wait was the hardest part. Aggie paced the cabin. She checked the mine entrance. She sharpened her leather knife. She reorganized Caleb's books by author, then by title, then back by author because the first way was better. Caleb sat on the porch with his rifle across his knees and watched the trail. At 3 o'clock, Pete came riding back up the mountain at a gallop. He jumped off his horse before it stopped. "They're coming," Pete said, breathing hard. "The judge, the sheriff, Cordelia Ashworth, and Wade Kirby, plus 6 armed men. They'll be here by sundown." 6 armed men, Caleb repeated. Brogan's deputies.
carrying Winchesters. Aggie came out of the cabin. Did Whitmore read the letter? He read it twice, smiled both times. The clerk told me Whitmore said, and I'm quoting here, "The fool is finally breaking." Then he ordered his horse saddled. Good, Aggie said. He's coming to gloat. That's exactly what we need. Pete, how many of the crew are at the mine right now? 7. Slim Jake is in town, getting supplies. Get them all to the cabin.
Tell them to stay out of sight, but listen to everything. Every word that comes out of Whitmore's mouth. Can you do that? Yes, ma'am. And Pete? No guns. I don't want anyone shooting. This ends with words, not bullets. Pete looked at Caleb. Caleb nodded. Pete rode for the mine. Aggie turned to Caleb. You need to let me do the talking. Aggie, Caleb James Thornton, if you open your mouth in front of that judge, you're going to say something that ends with someone dead. I know you. I've known you 2 weeks, and I know you better than you know yourself. You are a good man with a bad temper, and tonight I need the good man. He looked down at her. She looked up at him. 5'2" telling 6'5" what to do, and both of them knowing she was right. I'll keep my mouth shut, he said. No, you won't, but you'll try. That's enough. They heard the horses before they saw them. Hooves on rock, the jingle of bridles, the creak of saddle leather. The sound of Copper Ridge coming up the mountain with guns and greed. Judge Whitmore rode at the front on a gray gelding. He looked ridiculous in the wilderness, a town man in a town suit, sweating through his collar. Cordelia Ashworth rode behind him in a riding habit that probably cost more than the horse. Wade Kirby flanked them, his hand resting easy near his holster. Sheriff Brogan and 6 deputies brought up the rear. Caleb stood on the porch. He'd put on a clean shirt. His rifle leaned against the cabin wall, visible but not in hand. Aggie stood beside him, her hands folded in front of her. Whitmore dismounted and dusted off his jacket. He looked around at the cabin, the mine entrance, the creek. He looked at it the way a man looks at something he already owns. Thornton, Whitmore said, I'm glad you came to your senses. Judge, Caleb said. 1 word, flat as a stone. I read your letter. A wise decision, very wise. Whitmore pulled a document from his saddlebag. I've had my clerk draw up the transfer papers. You sign the mine over to the Copper Ridge Development Company, and all charges are dropped. You and your wife leave Montana with whatever you can carry on that horse. That's generous, Aggie said. Whitmore looked at her. His lip curled. He didn't address her. He spoke to Caleb. Your wife should go inside. This is men's business. My wife stays, Caleb said. She handles my affairs. Cordelia laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. A seamstress handles the affairs of a silver baron. How charming. A seamstress who reads law books, Aggie said mildly, and territorial mining codes, and bank ledgers. Speaking of which, Judge Whitmore, I have a question about the Copper Ridge Development Company. You can ask your questions to a wall, girl. I'm not here to be interrogated by... The company was incorporated 6 months ago in Chicago. The listed directors are a Mr. Harold Fenn and a Mr. George Poole, both of whom, as far as the territorial records show, don't exist. There's no address, no prior filings, no tax history. It's a ghost company, Judge, set up to receive stolen mining rights. The clearing went quiet. Even the horses stopped moving. Whitmore's smile faded slowly, like ice melting off a blade. I don't know what you're talking about. You sold shares in Caleb's mine to investors back east using a company you invented. You filed false claims with the territorial office.
You used Cordelia Ashworth's cattle company to launder the money. And when Caleb started asking questions, you tried to destroy the evidence and frame him for extortion. This is absurd. Brogan, arrest this woman for slander. It ain't slander if it's true, Harlan, Aggie said. She used his first name deliberately. She watched it hit him like a slap. And the evidence isn't destroyed. Those papers you found in my satchel? The ones you burned last night? Whitmore went very still.
How did you— Those were forgeries. I made them myself. The real documents are somewhere you'll never find them, and a copy is already on its way to U.S. Marshal James Davis in Helena. You're lying. Am I? You sent a telegram to Billings asking for reinforcements. Virgil Crane operates that wire. Virgil Crane also sent our telegram to Helena. The marshals are already arriving, Judge. Wade Kirby's hand moved toward his gun. Caleb shifted his weight, just barely, and Wade froze. Even without a weapon in his hand, Caleb Thornton was a threat that a smart man didn't test. Here's what's going to happen, Aggie said. Her voice was calm, clear, the voice of a woman standing on solid ground. You're going to ride back down that mountain. You're going to sit in your office and wait. When the marshals arrive, you can explain the Chicago company, the false claims, the embezzlement, and the fact that you jailed a federal witness and his wife on fabricated charges. Or, Aggie continued, you can sign a confession right now, in front of witnesses. I'll recommend leniency to Marshal Davis. A confession goes a long way with federal judges. Witnesses? Whitmore looked around. What witnesses? There's nobody here but your husband's thugs. Turn around, Judge. Whitmore turned. Standing in a line along the tree line were 8 men. Caleb's mining crew. Weathered, silent, hard-eyed men who worked underground and knew the value of truth because lies got people killed in a mine shaft. They'd heard everything. Pete Dawkins stepped forward. We heard it all, Judge. Every word. And we'll swear to it on a stack of Bibles. Whitmore's face went the color of old ash. He looked at Cordelia. She was backing toward her horse, her composure crumbling. This was your idea, Whitmore hissed at her. You said the girl was stupid. You said Thornton was a brute. You said— Shut up, Harlan, Cordelia screamed. Shut your mouth. She came to me, Whitmore said, turning to Aggie, his voice rising to a desperate pitch. Cordelia planned everything, the fake company, the false claims. She brought in Kirby. She paid Hector McAllister. I just signed the papers. I'm a weak man, Mrs. Thornton. I'm a weak man in debt to a strong woman. You spineless coward, Cordelia snarled. Write it down, Aggie said. She held out a pen and paper. All of it. Names, dates, amounts. Everything. Whitmore grabbed the pen. His hand was shaking so badly, the first line was barely legible. But he wrote. He wrote for 10 minutes, pouring out every rotten detail of the scheme, while Cordelia screamed at him to stop, and Wade Kirby quietly backed his horse toward the trail. Kirby, Caleb said. Just the name, nothing else. Wade stopped. Get off the horse. Wade got off the horse. Sheriff Brogan stood with his deputies, rifles useless in their hands, watching their world collapse. Brogan looked at Caleb. What about us? Brogan asked. You followed orders from a crooked judge, Caleb said. That makes you a fool, not a criminal. Drop your badges in the dirt and ride home. When the marshals come, tell the truth. All of it. 6 tin stars hit the ground. The deputies mounted their horses and rode down the mountain without looking back. Brogan was the last to go. He stopped in front of Aggie. I didn't know, Brogan said, about the false claims, about any of it. I just did what the judge told me. I believe you, Aggie said. Tell that to the marshals. Brogan dropped his badge. He rode away. Whitmore finished writing. He handed the confession to Aggie with trembling hands.
His face was wet with tears and sweat. Aggie read it, every line. She looked up. "This is everything?" "Everything. I swear it." "Then you can go. Ride back to town. Pack a bag. When the marshals arrive, don't run. Running makes it worse."
Whitmore climbed onto his horse like a man climbing into his own coffin. He rode away without looking at Cordelia. Cordelia Ashworth stood alone. Her riding habit was dusty. Her hair had come loose. The mask of beauty and breeding had cracked, and underneath was just a woman who had bet everything on greed and lost. She looked at Aggie. "You think you've won?" "I don't think anything, Mrs. Ashworth. I know." "You're still the fat girl from Miners' Row. New ring, new name, but underneath, you're still nothing." Aggie stepped forward, close enough to see the fear behind Cordelia's contempt. "My mother used to say you can tell the quality of a garment by the stitching on the inside, where nobody looks. Your stitching, Cordelia, is rotten. It always was." Cordelia's mouth opened. Nothing came out. She mounted her horse and rode down the mountain, and she didn't look back either. Wade Kirby stood alone in the clearing, his silver dollar frozen in his hand. He looked at Caleb. He looked at Aggie. He tipped his hat. "Ma'am," he said, "for what it's worth, you're the best bluff I've ever seen, and I've played cards in every territory west of the Mississippi." "Get off my mountain," Caleb said. Wade got on his horse and rode away whistling. The clearing was empty. The dust settled. The creek murmured its endless conversation with the rocks. Caleb sat down on the porch steps. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, from the effort of keeping his mouth shut and his fists unclenched for the longest 30 minutes of his life. Aggie sat beside him. She leaned against his arm. He put his hand on her knee. "You did it," he said. "We did it." "No, you. I just stood there looking mean." "You're very good at looking mean. It's a valuable skill." "Aggie." "Yeah?" "I love you." She went still. She turned to look at him. His gray-blue eyes were wet. She'd never seen that before. Didn't think it was possible. "Say it again," she whispered. "I love you, Agnes Marie Thornton. I loved you when you fixed my boot. I loved you when you turned down my gold. I loved you when you told me your mama's philosophy about garments. I loved you when you picked a jail cell lock with a hairpin. And I love you now." Aggie put her hand on his bearded cheek. "I love you too, Caleb. I've loved you since you asked my name in the general store. Nobody ever asked my name before." He pulled her close. She fit against him like a key in a lock, small against his bigness, soft against his hardness, whole against his broken places. He kissed her hair. She pressed her ear to his chest and listened to his heart. They sat on that porch while the sun went down behind the Beartooth Peaks, and the sky turned the color of fire, and then the color of peace. They didn't talk about the marshals, or the trial, or the mine. They just sat together, two people who had found each other in the wreckage of their separate lives and built something that the whole town of Copper Ridge couldn't tear down. Caleb's hand found hers. His thumb traced the ruby ring. "Your grandmother's ring survived a war in a boot heel," Aggie said quietly. "It did. Reckon it can survive a little more trouble?" "Reckon it can." She squeezed his hand. He squeezed back. The first stars appeared over the mountain, bright and sharp and endless, and the silence between them was not the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of two people who had nothing left to prove and everything left to protect. The peace lasted exactly 31 hours. Monday morning, Caleb woke before dawn to the sound of gunpowder screaming. Not nickering. Screaming. The kind of sound a horse makes when it smells blood. He grabbed his rifle and hit the porch barefoot. Pete Dawkins was riding up the trail at full gallop, bent low over his horse's neck. There was blood on his shirt. "Pete!" Caleb jumped off the porch and caught the horse's bridle as Pete slid from the saddle. "What happened?" "Kirby!" Pete gasped. His left arm was soaked red from shoulder to elbow. "He didn't leave. He circled back last night. Hit the mine before dawn. Tied up the crew. Took the dynamite." Aggie was at the door. "How much dynamite?" 12 sticks. And blasting caps." Caleb's face went white under his beard. "He's going to blow the mine." "He already set the charges. I saw the fuses when I broke loose." "Caleb, he wired the entrance. If those charges go off, the whole tunnel collapses. The evidence chamber, the silver vein, everything. Buried under 1,000 tons of rock." Aggie grabbed Caleb's arm. "How long?" "The fuses were long. Maybe an hour. Maybe less. I don't know. I ain't a dynamite man." Caleb was already moving. He shoved his feet into his boots and grabbed a canteen. "Stay here, both of you." "I'm coming," Aggie said. "No." "The documents, Caleb. If that mine collapses, we lose the originals. We lose everything. Whitmore's confession on paper means nothing without the evidence to back it up. Any lawyer worth his salt will call it coerced." Caleb stopped. She was right. He knew she was right. He hated that she was right. "Then move fast," he said. They ran, not rode. The mine was a quarter-mile up the canyon, and the trail was too narrow and rocky for a horse at full speed. Caleb ran with the rifle in one hand and Aggie's hand in the other, half pulling her up the steep grade. Her ribs screamed. Her lungs burned. She didn't slow down. They reached the mine entrance in 8 minutes. The boulders Caleb had placed to hide the opening had been rolled aside. Inside, the tunnel was dark. Caleb lit a lantern and they plunged in. The fuse was easy to find. It ran along the floor of the tunnel like a thin white snake, branching at 3 points where dynamite sticks were wired to the support timbers. Wade Kirby knew what he was doing. He'd placed the charges at the load-bearing joints. When they blew, the whole tunnel would pancake. "How much time?" Aggie asked. Caleb knelt by the nearest fuse. It was burning, slow but steady. A thin line of sparks crawling toward the first charge. 10 minutes, maybe 12. "The chamber is at the back, 200 yards. "I know how far my own mine is, Aggie." "Then stop talking and start running." They ran deeper. The air got colder. The lantern threw wild shadows on the granite walls. Aggie could hear the fuse hissing behind them, a sound like a snake sliding through dry grass. They reached the dead end. Caleb pressed the hidden trigger in the rock. The stone door swung open. The oilskin pouch sat on the shelf where Aggie had placed it. She grabbed it and stuffed it into her dress, against her skin, close to her heart. "Go," Caleb said. "Go now." They turned and ran back the way they'd come. 200 yards of tunnel. The fuse sparks were closer now, visible in the darkness ahead, like tiny orange stars. Caleb stopped at the first charge. He pulled his knife and cut the fuse. Dead. He moved to the second. Cut it. The third charge was deeper in a side tunnel. The fuse had already reached the branch point. It was burning in 2 directions. "I'll get the third," Caleb said. "You get out." "We both get out." "Aggie, if I can't cut it in time." "Then we both don't get out. I didn't marry you to be a widow, Caleb Thornton. Move your legs." He moved. They scrambled into the side tunnel. The fuse was 8 feet from the dynamite. 6 feet. 4. Caleb lunged. His knife came down on the fuse 2 feet from the charge. The spark died. The tunnel went dark, except for the lantern in Aggie's shaking hand. Silence. Complete, ringing, beautiful silence. Caleb sat on the tunnel floor. He was breathing like he'd run a mile straight uphill. Aggie sat next to him. Her hands were trembling so bad the lantern light danced on the walls. "That was close," Caleb said. "That was stupid. We should have just grabbed the documents and run." "And let him blow my mine?" "Your mine can be redug. You can't be redug." He looked at her. She looked at him. And then they both started laughing. The wild, breathless, half-hysterical laughter of two people who just outran death in a dark hole in the ground. "We need to find Kirby," Caleb said when the laughter faded. "He's long gone." "No, he ain't. Kirby's a gambler. He set those charges, and he's watching from somewhere to make sure they go off. When they don't, he'll come to check. Then we'll be waiting." They climbed out of the mine into the morning light. Caleb positioned himself behind the boulder pile at the entrance. Aggie hid behind a rock outcrop 30 yards up the slope, where she could see the trail below. They waited 20 minutes. Wade Kirby came up the trail on foot, careful and quiet, his pistol drawn. He stopped 50 yards from the mine entrance. He cocked his head and listened. No explosion, no rumble, no collapse. "Well," Wade muttered, "that ain't right." He moved closer. 20 yards. 10. Caleb rose from behind the boulders like a mountain coming to life. He didn't use the rifle. He crossed the distance in 3 strides and hit Wade Kirby with a right hand that had 7 years of solitude and 2 weeks of fury behind it. Wade went down like a sack of wet grain. His pistol skittered across the rocks. Caleb picked him up by the collar, slammed him against the rock face, and held him there with one hand. "Who's paying you?" Caleb growled. Wade spat blood. His jaw was already swelling. "Nobody. I'm freelance now." Whitmore confessed. "Cordelia's done." "Why are you still here?" "Because the judge promised me something worth more than money if I destroyed that mine." Wade grinned through bloody teeth. "He promised me a pardon. I've got warrants in 3 territories, Thornton. Murder, robbery, fraud. Whitmore said if I buried that mine, he'd make the warrants disappear. Whitmore can't make anything disappear anymore. I know that now. Wish I'd known it before I wasted 12 sticks of perfectly good dynamite." Caleb's grip tightened. "Give me one reason not to throw you off this mountain." "Because your wife is watching," Wade said, his eyes sliding to Aggie on the slope. "And she's the type who'd feel bad about it later. Me, I wouldn't lose sleep. But she would." Caleb looked at Aggie. She was coming down the slope, the oilskin pouch clutched to her chest. "Tie him up," Aggie said. "The marshals can have him. He tried to blow the mine. He tried to bury the evidence. And he failed. Tie him up, Caleb." Caleb's hand shook with the effort of not squeezing harder. Every muscle in his body wanted to finish this the mountain way. But Aggie's eyes were on him, and in those warm hazel eyes he saw something he couldn't betray. Trust. Not just in him, but in the man she believed he was. He let go. Wade dropped to his knees, coughing. Pete Dawkins limped up the trail with a rope in his good hand. They tied Wade Kirby to a pine tree with enough slack to breathe, but not enough to stand. "Comfortable?" Aggie asked him. "I've had worse accommodations." "I'm sure you have." They left him there and walked back to the cabin. Aggie's legs gave out on the porch steps. She sat down hard, the oilskin pouch still pressed against her body. Caleb sat beside her. He took her hand. Her fingers were ice cold despite the July heat. "It's over," he said. "It ain't over until the marshals ride in." "They'll come." "You keep saying that." "Because I believe it."
And if I stop believing, then I'd believe enough for both of us.
She leaned against him and closed her eyes. She was asleep in 30 seconds. Caleb sat there with his rifle across his knees and his wife against his shoulder, watching the trail, waiting for the law to come and finish what Aggie had started. Tuesday came and went. No marshals. Caleb kept watch. Aggie tended Pete's wound, a deep graze that had missed the bone by an inch. She stitched it with the same waxed sinew she'd used on Caleb's boot. Pete gritted his teeth and didn't make a sound. "You're good at that," Pete said when she finished. "I'm good at fixing things," Aggie said. "People, boots, mines, doesn't matter. Broken is broken." "You ain't what they said you were, down in town." "What did they say I was?" "Nothing kind. But they were wrong, every last one of them." "I know," Aggie said. And for the first time, she said it like she meant it. Wednesday morning, Caleb heard horses. He grabbed his rifle and went to the porch. Aggie came out behind him, her hand on the leather knife in her apron. 6 riders came up the trail. They rode hard, their horses lathered and blowing. The lead rider wore a silver star in his chest that caught the morning sun and threw it back like a signal fire. U.S. Marshal James Davis was a lean man in his 50s, with a face like weathered saddle leather and eyes that had seen every kind of trouble the West could offer. He pulled his horse to a stop in front of the cabin and looked at Caleb Thornton. "You're a hard man to find, Thornton." "That's by design, Marshal." Davis dismounted. He looked at Aggie, tipped his hat. "Ma'am, you must be the wife I've been hearing about." "You've been hearing about me?" "Virgil Crane sent a second wire Monday morning. Told me the whole story. Said you picked a jail cell lock with a hairpin and bluffed a professional gambler with fake documents." "Virgil talks too much." "Virgil's a patriot." Davis pulled a folded paper from his coat. "I've got warrants for Judge Harlan Whitmore, Cordelia Ashworth, Wade Kirby, and Sheriff Walt Brogan. Federal charges: fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, false imprisonment, and attempted destruction of evidence." "Kirby's tied to a tree about a quarter-mile up the canyon," Caleb said. "He tried to blow my mine." "We'll collect him." Davis looked at Aggie. "The documents. You have them?" Aggie reached into her dress and pulled out the oilskin pouch. She handed it to the marshal. Davis opened it. He read the first page, then the second, then the third. His eyebrows rose higher with each page. "Mrs. Thornton, this is the most thorough collection of evidence I've seen in 20 years of marshalling. Bank records, contracts, telegrams, witness statements. A federal prosecutor could convict half the territory with this." "My wife is thorough," Caleb said. "Your wife should have been a lawyer." "My wife is whatever she wants to be," Aggie said. "Right now, she wants to go home and take a bath." Davis almost smiled. "We'll ride down and make the arrests. I'd ask you to come, but I reckon you've had enough of Copper Ridge for a while." "We'll come," Aggie said. Caleb looked at her. She looked at him. "We'll come because that town needs to see us walk in together. They need to see that we're standing. They laughed at me my whole life, Marshal. They called me names I won't repeat. They watched my father beat me and said nothing. They watched Cordelia and the judge steal and cheat, and they looked the other way because it was easier than standing up." She straightened her shoulders. "I want them to watch me walk in. Not because I want revenge, because I want them to remember what it looks like when someone they counted out refuses to fall down." Davis looked at Caleb. "She always like this?" "Every single day." "You're a lucky man." "I know it." They rode into Copper Ridge at noon. Caleb on gunpowder, Aggie in front of him, the way they'd ridden on their wedding day, his arms around her, his buffalo coat over her shoulders, even though it was July, and she told him 3 times she was hot. The marshals rode behind them, 6 badges gleaming in the sun. Main Street went dead silent. The blacksmith came out, the baker, the ranchers' wives, the miners, the children. Emmett Pritchard stood in the doorway of his store with his mouth open. They watched the marshals dismount at the courthouse. They watched Davis and his deputies walk inside. They heard the shouting, then the silence, then the sound of handcuffs clicking shut. Judge Harlan Whitmore was let out first. His wrists were chained. His face was gray. He didn't look at anyone. Cordelia Ashworth came next. She was crying. Real tears this time, not the theatrical kind she produced at funerals and church socials. She saw Aggie on the horse and stopped walking.
"You," Cordelia said. "You ruined me." "No, Mrs. Ashworth," Aggie said from the saddle. "You ruined yourself. I just made sure people could see it." The deputies led Cordelia away. She didn't speak again. Sheriff Brogan came out last. He wasn't handcuffed. He'd told the truth, as Aggie had predicted. Davis had reduced his charges to cooperation. Brogan stopped in front of Gunpowder and looked up at Aggie. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Thornton. For the jail, for all of it." "I believe you, Walt. But sorry is just a word. What matters is what you do next." "What should I do?" "Be the kind of lawman this town deserves, not the kind the judge paid for." Brogan nodded. He walked away with whatever was left of his dignity. The crowd hadn't moved. 200 people standing in the dust, watching the world they knew get dismantled and rebuilt in front of their eyes. Caleb dismounted. He helped Aggie down. She stood in the middle of Main Street in her dusty work dress with leather dye under her nails and a ruby ring on her finger. And she looked at the people of Copper Ridge. Nobody called her Round Aggie. Nobody whispered. Nobody laughed. An old woman in the front of the crowd stepped forward. Mrs. Hannigan, the schoolteacher. 70 years old, bent with arthritis, the only person in town who had never said a cruel word about Agnes McAllister. "We're sorry, Agnes," Mrs. Hannigan said. Her voice carried in the silence. "We should have done better by you." "Yes," Aggie said, "you should have." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a speech. It was the truth, spoken plainly by a woman who had earned the right to speak it. One by one, the crowd began to move. The baker brought bread. The blacksmith offered his hand to Caleb. Women who had whispered about Aggie's weight and her father and her poverty came forward with eyes that wouldn't meet hers, offering small kindnesses that were too late, but not unwelcome. Aggie accepted them all. Not because she needed their approval anymore, because grace was something her mother had taught her alongside leather stitching, and she wasn't going to throw it away now. Marshal Davis came out of the courthouse and crossed the street to where Caleb and Aggie stood. "It's done," Davis said. "Whitmore and Ashworth will be transported to Helena for trial. With the evidence you've gathered, they'll see federal prison. The mining claims have been voided. Your property is secure, Mr. Thornton. All of it." "What about Kirby?" Caleb asked. 3 warrants and 3 territories. He'll be a guest of the federal government for a long time." "And my father?" Aggie asked quietly. Davis paused. "We picked up Hector McAllister at the train depot this morning. He was trying to buy a ticket to California with $50 in his pocket. Cordelia's money. Most likely. We're not charging him. He's a small fish, and frankly, he's more pitiful than dangerous." Davis looked at her carefully. "Do you want to see him?" Aggie was quiet for a long time. Caleb put his hand on her back, but didn't speak. This was her decision. "Yes," she said. "I want to see him." They brought Hector to the marshal's office. He sat in a wooden chair with his hat in his hands, shaking.
When Aggie walked in, he stood up so fast the chair fell over.
Aggie, I heard what happened. I heard everything. The mine, the dynamite.
Sit down, Pa. He sat. He couldn't look at her. You sold me out, Aggie said. Twice. You took their money, and you came to my door with fake blood on your face, and you tried to steal the one thing that could save us. I know. And then you ran. I know. You've been running my whole life, Pa. Running from Mama's death. Running from your debts. Running from being my father. Hector's shoulders shook. Tears ran down his weathered face and dripped onto his hat. I can't fix you, Aggie said. Caleb wanted to pay your debts. I said no, because paying a man's debts don't change the man. Only the man can change the man. I know that too. The marshals aren't charging you. You're free to go. California if you want. Anywhere. Hector looked up. His eyes were red and lost. Will you ever forgive me? Aggie looked at her father, the man who hit her, the man who called her useless, the man who sold her trust for $50. She looked at him, and she saw what she'd always seen underneath the whiskey and the cruelty and the weakness. A broken man who never learned how to mend himself. I forgive you, Pa. Not for you. For me. Because carrying your weight is too heavy, and I've carried enough for one lifetime. She walked to him and kissed his forehead. It was the first time she kissed her father in 10 years. Go to California, she whispered. Start over. Be better. If not for me, then for the memory of a woman who loved you more than you ever deserved. Hector McAllister grabbed his daughter's hand and held it against his wet cheek. He didn't have words. He'd never had the right words. But for one moment, in that dusty marshal's office, he held on to the only good thing he'd ever made, and he felt the full, crushing weight of what he'd wasted. Then Aggie pulled her hand away and walked out. Caleb was waiting on the boardwalk. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. He saw it on her face, the grief and the relief, and the terrible freedom of letting go of someone you love who can't love you back the right way. He took her hand. Ready to go home? Take me up the mountain, Caleb. They rode out of Copper Ridge for the last time that afternoon. Not the last time forever, but the last time as strangers. The next time they came down, they'd come as what they were, the owners of the richest mine in Montana, the couple who broke a conspiracy and brought federal justice to a corrupt town. The mountain man and the seamstress who proved that the whole world was wrong about both of them. The summer passed. The wildflowers bloomed in the mountain meadows. Caleb expanded the cabin. He built a workshop for Aggie with a proper leather bench and a window that caught the morning light. He hung the German tools on a pegboard above the bench, and Aggie arranged them the way her mother would have, each one in its place, each one ready. She started a business, not in town, on the mountain. Word spread through the territory that the best leather worker in Montana lived at the Thornton mine, and cowboys and ranchers rode from 3 counties away to have their saddles mended, their boots resoled, their harnesses repaired by the woman with the magic hands. She charged fair prices. She did honest work, and she never turned anyone away, no matter how torn or beaten the leather was. You can't fix everything, Caleb told her one evening, watching her work on a saddle so old and cracked it looked like it had crossed the plains. Maybe not, Aggie said, pulling her needle through. But I can try. That's what my mama taught me. You try, and if the stitching holds, you did good. And if it don't, you try again. Your mama was right. She usually was. Caleb leaned against the doorframe. I got a letter from Marshal Davis today. And? Whitmore got 8 years federal prison. Cordelia got 5. Kirby got 12, stacked with the other warrants. Aggie set down her needle. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. "That's justice," she said. "You don't seem happy about it." "I'm not happy about it. I'm satisfied. There's a difference. Happy is when something good starts. Satisfied is when something bad ends." "So what starts now?" Aggie looked up at her husband, the man who had come down from the mountain for nails and whiskey and found something he didn't know he was looking for. The man who chose the town outcast over every beauty in the territory. The man who knelt before her in a hotel room and wiped the dirt from her face the way she'd knelt before him in a general store and stitched his broken boot. "Everything," she said, "everything starts now." The letter from California came on a Tuesday in September. It was short. The handwriting was shaky but legible. "Dear Aggie, I got work at a ranch outside Sacramento, mucking stalls. It ain't much, but it's honest, and the foreman don't allow drinking. I'm 63 days sober. I know that don't erase what I done. I know a number don't fix a life. But your mama used to say the first stitch is the hardest. I'm trying to make the first stitch. Your father, Hector." Aggie read the letter 3 times. She folded it carefully and placed it in the wooden box where she kept her mother's thimble, her marriage certificate, and the brass hairpin that had picked a jail cell lock. She didn't write back. Not yet. Some threads needed time before they were ready to be sewn. That autumn, the town of Copper Ridge elected a new judge and a new sheriff. They rebuilt the courthouse with honest money. They renamed the main road Thornton Street, though Caleb told them that was foolish, and Aggie told them it should have been McAllister Street. And they compromised by calling it nothing and letting people call it whatever they wanted. The mine produced silver for 20 more years. Caleb and Aggie built a house on the mountain, a real house, with a library and a workshop and a nursery that wasn't empty for long. They had a daughter first, then a son. The daughter had Aggie's hands and Caleb's stubbornness. The son had Caleb's size and Aggie's mind. Both of them learned to read before they learned to ride. And they learned to ride before they learned to walk. Because that's how mountain children grow. Aggie never lost the weight the town had mocked her for. She didn't try. Her body was strong and capable, and it carried children and climbed mountains and knelt on hard floors to mend what was broken. And that was enough. It had always been enough. The only thing that changed was that she finally believed it. Years later, a journalist from the Helena newspaper rode up the mountain to interview the famous Thorntons. He expected a grizzled hermit and a meek housewife. He found a giant of a man reading Plato on the porch, and a woman with hazel eyes and calloused hands running a leather business that supplied half the territory. "Mrs. Thornton," the journalist asked, pencil poised, "the whole territory knows your story. What would you say to the people who doubted you?" Aggie set down the saddle she was stitching. She thought about it for a long time. "I'd say the same thing my mother told me when I was 10 years old and crying because the other children called me names." She held up the needle and thread in her hand. "You can tell the quality of a person the same way you tell the quality of a boot. Don't look at the outside. Look at the stitching. The real stitching. The part nobody sees. Because that's what holds everything together when the road gets rough." The journalist wrote it down. It became the most quoted line in Montana Territory that year. Caleb read the article on the porch that evening while Aggie worked in her shop. He read her quote 3 times. Then he folded the newspaper, walked into the workshop, and stood in the doorway. "What?" Aggie asked without looking up. "I love you." "I know. You tell me every day." "And I'll tell you tomorrow." "I know that too." He crossed the room. He took the needle from her hand. He pulled her to her feet and held her, the way he'd held her that first night on the porch after Whitmore's confession. like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting under his boots. "They used to call me the ghost of the Beartooth Mountains," he said into her hair. "They used to call me Round Aggie. Look at us now. Look at us now." She pulled back and looked up at him. He looked down at her. 7 years of silence, broken by a woman with a needle. 26 years of invisibility, ended by a man who asked her name. "You mended me, Aggie. You saw me, Caleb. That's all I ever needed. Someone to see me. I see you. Every day. Every day for the rest of my life." She kissed him. Not the short promise kiss from the courthouse. A real kiss. The kind that holds 30 years and says, "I chose you, and I choose you again." And that is the story of Caleb and Martha Thornton, a mountain man who had all the gold in the world and none of the things that mattered. A seamstress who had nothing but her mother's hands and a heart made of rawhide and iron. A town that judged them both and got it wrong. And a love that started with a torn boot and a woman brave enough to fix it. They called her the Mountain Queen, not because she married rich, not because she wore silk or rubies, because she stood on that mountain and she did not break. She bent, she stitched, she held. And when the storm passed, she was still standing, with the man she loved beside her and the whole impossible sky above. Nobody in Copper Ridge, and nobody in the whole Montana Territory, ever called her Round Aggie again. She was simply Agnes, and she was loved. And if this story moved your heart today, do us a small kindness. Hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that being underestimated is not the same as being defeated. Subscribe so you never miss our next story. And tell us in the comments, what city are you watching from? We love knowing how far these stories travel. Because stories, like good stitching, are meant to hold people together across the distance.